My name is Heidi Hausse. I'm a postdoc at the Society of Fellows in the Humanities here at Columbia University. I'm also a lecturer in the history department here. I received my PhD in history from Princeton University in 2016. My research project is entitled Life and Limb, Technology, Surgery, and Bodily Loss in Early Modern Germany. It's a project that explores a transformation in the way in which Europeans were taking apart and putting back together the human body surgically through amputation and artificially with the manufacture of prostheses. So what the book argues is essentially that in 1500, Europeans were hesitant to manipulate the shape of the human body. By 1700, experimental methods in amputation proliferated, and elite patients could obtain sophisticated mechanical limbs. The way that I approach this transformation in the malleability of the body is through a narrative arc of taking the body apart and putting it back together. So the first half of the project focuses on surgeons, patients, and this process of how to remove a limb, when to remove a limb, and what to do right after an amputation. The second half of the project focuses on artisans, including locksmiths, clockmakers, armorers, even gunsmiths, who are essentially making mechanical hands and arms at the request of clients who are coming to them with their needs and asking for these things on an ad hoc basis. Overall, as a whole, the project argues for the rise of the malleable body in Europe that's happening through these practices of surgeons on the operating bench and artisans in their workshops. I became interested in this project actually after reading surgical treatises on what was called the French disease. Sometimes we refer to it as early modern syphilis, which was actually a really new disease in the 16th century in Europe. And many of the treatises were really focused on why is this happening. So there was a lot of astrological theory. And I realized what I was really interested in and what was sort of happening on the side throughout in the treatment of these patients was dealing with these decaying parts of the human body and what to do about it. And I realized that actually what would make a really fascinating topic to explore further is what to do as the body is coming apart, how to take it apart and put it back together. So it all started with syphilis. Last year in 2016, 2017, I taught in the core curriculum. I taught contemporary civilization, both halves. One of the experiences I try to cultivate in the classroom is something that I would call an intellectually rigorous version of role play. And it's something that's intended to get the students to approach primary sources in a period that they're unfamiliar with in an open-minded way and creative way to sort of think as historical actors in the past may have thought. So for example, last year when teaching contemporary civilization, we had a week on Machiavelli and we worked on The Prince. And The Prince is a book in which Machiavelli is giving advice on how the princeps in Italy should go about essentially ruling, like how to obtain power and hold on to it is this book. And I had devised 4 or 5 scenarios based on things that Machiavelli says in The Prince that I then posed. So tell me as the prince what I should do in case of X or Y. And it's something the students became very excited about. They picked up on right away and it showed me how much of the material that they had absorbed, but also let them apply the material to think through exactly, what is Machiavelli really trying to get at when he makes different kinds of suggestions. One of the great things about being a fellow is you get to learn a lot about how your fellow fellows approach their different disciplines. You get to learn about how they think, how they ask questions, and it influences the way that you identify your own strengths and also ways in which you could broaden your approaches to things. One of the best ways that this comes across in part of what we do in the society is through the Thursday luncheon lectures that happen every fall, where you get to hear about what the other fellows are working on, and you also present your own work. So I just presented a couple of weeks ago, and I got to actually share a chapter that I had never presented aloud before because of the topic was about exploring different techniques to amputate in early modern Germany. It basically gave me a platform to sort of lay out one of the biggest claims that I have in the book project, and hear what all of these scholars that I highly respect and have such different perspectives, how they responded to it, and areas that they thought could be strengthened and areas that they thought were, was something that I should focus more on. One of the things I'm working on right now is, it's really exciting. It's an interdisciplinary lecture series that's entitled Exploration in the Medical Humanities. It's something I've co-organized with a couple of my fellow fellows here in the Society. Carmel Raz, who does music theory in the 19th century, and Arden Hagley, who does Romanticism in British literature. And we've come together to put together a series that is intended to create an interdisciplinary dialogue here on campus about the medical humanities. So the idea is to bring in people from outside of Columbia that are working in different disciplines and have different approaches to their work, connect them to faculty and postdocs here on campus to give a response, and then have a general Q&A on Mondays. And it's just one example of the many opportunities that we have in the Society for these kinds of intellectual collaborations that are incredibly enriching for us, not only in what we are currently working on in our specialized fields, but also as who we are as scholars and how we're going to approach topics far into the future.